Florida State's quarterback play is so bad. Jordan Travis, really, they miss Jordan Travis, right? We really miss him. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop you to 5, one spot ahead of Georgia, who has their entire team intact. So your rationale is that this Florida State team is better than the 2-time defending national champ. It should be, Florida State should be a little bit lower. Just using if that's their true rationale.
Exactly. If the true rationale holds and you believe this is a completely different team, then rank them appropriately. You think they're like the 13th best team in the country now or the 17th best? Rank them there. Say they're 13-0, they're number 17 in the country. If they're a completely different team, then you're not number 4 or number 5. If you're a completely different team. And then my last point before we let George talk here is the quarterback situation and the evaluation of how different the team is could have been made a week earlier. That was the quarterback that is going to be playing in the playoff. So if you had such a drastic, different viewpoint of what Florida State football is without Jordan Travis and with Tate Rodemaker, then rank that the previous week after the Florida performance. Hey, George, how you doing today?
Hanging in there, Mark, man. I agree with everything everybody said, man. It's just wild. Like just extremely condescending. Why are you going to sit at us 5? Like, if you're going to drop us, if Texas is going to jump from 7 all the way to 3, I agree, man. Just show us what you really think. Tell us where you really think we're ranked and put us there. Because and that's what I kept playing over and over again on my show was that clip with him saying that Florida State just isn't the same team. You watch the SEC show and it was the whole thing stumped them for why UGA and Alabama should probably both be in it. You watch the ACC championship and it was just 3.5 hours of why Florida State shouldn't be in it and they don't have this and they don't have that. I'm sure like a lot of FSU fans, I muted it somewhere along in the second quarter and all you can do is just watch your team and cheer for them. And it's an unprecedented situation. Just there's only so much you can do with it. It's unfortunate.
Can I say something real quick about the ACC broadcast? I think Jesse Palmer is really good at what he does. I like to listen to him. But he was making a comment with like 45 seconds left in the game that Florida State, they really need to score here. They really need to score. It's going to look good. If that's the truth, either he doesn't know what he's talking about, or if that's the truth, if a final touchdown that is completely meaningless would impact that committee, then they're incompetent. They're not doing their jobs. Just to tack on a touchdown. I understand in the middle of the season, run up a score here when everybody's playing, that sort of thing, make your whole resume look better. But in that situation, when the committee is just laser focused on that game and what's going on, I think you're scoring a touchdown with 45 seconds left. That if that's going to influence them, then they're incompetent.
It comes down to what we talked about this whole time. Unfortunately, it didn't break the way we all thought it would, the way they have the rest of the years. Everything leading up to the final ranking is BS, made for TV product. They're going to put in who they want at the end, regardless. And I know Chris was about to say something. Go ahead. They're going to put in who they want, and that's what they did. And this year, it just happened to be 2 future SEC teams and 2 future Big Ten teams.
Here's the thing. And I'm probably going to die on this hill, to be honest. But it's cool. Florida State was never getting in.
Yeah.
It was never going to happen. No matter what we did, it wasn't going to happen because they can't do any more than what they did. And here's what I'm going to start with. The committee and everyone else that knew that Florida State was not going to get in from the beginning. And yes, I truly believe that. I don't want it to be right, but I truly believe it's right. They put 13 teams in front of us and said, do our dirty work. One of y'all beat them. And we don't have to have this conversation. We don't have to be bad guys. We don't have to make it look egregious. But you put 13 teams up against us in between the chalk lines, and they couldn't accomplish. They all failed. So 13 universities, 8 of them being bowl eligible, one of them being a former last year SEC East champion, could not do it, could not pull it off. But 13 bought and paid for old white dudes with a pen, goobers that have like no idea of integrity, no idea of perseverance, no idea what it takes, no idea what it is to cry, bleed, and sweat on the field, take their little pen and they say, Florida State's out, which we knew this already, but now we have to make an excuse. But do we really? All we got to say is, you ain't got a quarterback. So let's put it back on the kid that's already dealing with one of the wildest injuries in football, the sport itself. Let's say, hey, Jordan, it's your fault that y'all aren't in because you got hurt, buddy. Like, sorry, but you ain't got enough on you. Let's throw this on you. You made, even if it's just one, you ruined hundreds of kids as far as what they believe, what they've been taught from little league up. And that's just the ones I know that it affected at Florida State. But to top it off, the one that you hurt the most makes a comment publicly stating he wished he would have broke his leg sooner so you could see how good this team was without him.
Unreal.
That one comment alone, and Mark, if saying bastards is a problem, I'm sorry. But the 13 bastards that wrote off on that, I hope you never sleep again. I really, honest to God, do. Until you come out and formally apologize that you're ignorant, you should step down and never be part of a committee again as long as you live. Till you do that, you should not be forgiven. You have there's no reason to forgive you. Here's the responsible parties. The 13 committee members, first and foremost. Secondly, the ACC. The ACC should be doing what the state of Florida is doing. It should be the state of Florida. The ACC should be demanding all of this information. They should be asking the questions, and they're not. Phillips puts out, and I don't mind Phillips. I just think that they PR stunted it, and they did what the ACC said they were going to do, and that was, well, congratulations to Florida State on a 13-0 season and an ACC championship. Man, it's crazy they didn't get in. Have a good day.
It goes back to – oh, my bad.
They're bought and paid for by ESPN.
Yes, that's it. And it goes back to the beginning of the year, and we loved it and we were all about it. But Michael Alford comes out and he calls out the hypocrisy of the ACC, the grant rights deal that's in place with ESPN, and how it's just putting us behind the narrative, behind the 8 ball year after year, how it can't be it's untenable situation. We cannot go forward like this. We're not going to be able to compete in the future. Well, the ACC smaller teams, they didn't like this crap. Some of them voted for SMU, Cal to come in. And who was one of these smaller teams? Was NC State one of them? Were they one of the ringleaders? One of the ones who didn't like FSU acting like they're carrying the conference? You end up with a guy, Buchorden, and head of this conference. And stuff happens. The conference doesn't support you. He basically goes up there and allows the conference ACC to be sacrificed at the altar. I mean, it's dead. There's no, once you can go 13-0 and you're the flagship program in Florida State of the conference and you don't get in, that's it. No more finito. You're done. You're not a Power 5. It's a Power 2, whatever you want to call it. Like Chris said, I think it was decided, after those comments came out and, they went to war behind the scenes. It's like they said they were going to stick it on somebody. It's just a shame it was stuck on Jordan Travis and those kids.
We're in a conference that doesn't respect itself. Sorry, James. I was trying to finish before then George started hitting the point, so I shut up. But we're in a conference that doesn't respect itself. They don't respect themselves at all. And neither does the college football world. No one respects the ACC anymore. And that's perfectly fine. Here's my question to the lawyers and legality people that are out there. Does that mean you just breached your contract of your grant of rights because you didn't protect your brand? The brands that represent you as an ACC? The ACC that represents these brands? Does that mean that now you should be held accountable? Because you did zero to protect us. You have a person on the committee who agreed for this to happen. And yes, NC State, by the way, was one of those schools that hated that we said what we said. Just so you know, their AD came out almost immediately after Alford and said that this was the wrong way to approach it. And the ACC is a fine conference. And of course it is for a school like yours. And I don't mean anything towards that, but smaller schools can survive on smaller money. It's just a fact. NC State's not going after national titles. Let's just be honest about it. They would love to squeak one out. If they get one in the next 100 years, they'll be ecstatic. Florida State needs 10 within 100 years, if 20 or 30. Like that we have expectations because of what we persevered and became starting in the 80s, like James just said earlier. Ohio State has expectations every year to win every game and be in the national title. And I'm sorry, y'all, and I know this is about Florida State, but if I'm Ohio State, if I'm Georgia, I'm livid that two other 12-1 teams got in over me when especially Ohio State lost to a Michigan team that's been ranked in the top 4 ever since the committee came out. I'm pissed. And it's not their fault that they didn't get the opportunity to replay Michigan in the conference championship because they are still holding on to the old way of there's 2 separate sides of the conference and the 2 best out of each side get to play for it. Okay, that's not Ohio State's fault. They aren't given the opportunity to play for that, even though their record's by far better than the team that got to play against Michigan. There's so many unequals that get so many different scenarios put on them or so many different ways of getting graded. It's not just down to the – I'm telling y'all, I don't care if Jordan Travis was healthy and we would have won the rest of our games 33-0. We were not getting in. They weren't going to let it happen. Before he got hurt, before we had a bad game against North Alabama, they already had us out. They already were talking about – the narrative had been spun. And if the committee or ESPN want to sit here and lie any longer and say that this information is not being leaked to ESPN days, if not weeks, if not – hell, I don't know. Maybe they give them the whole grant. This is what we're going to do. If this works, this is what we're going to do if that works. That's leaked way before. The lady that talks to the committee, she put out the exact top 4 hours before. Herb Street has had the 4 helmets behind them. Everybody was like, no, that's been his top 4 for the – no, it hasn't. He just changed those the week that he's changed the narrative on who the top 4 were going to be. They said that's his personal top 4. No, it's not. That is not where he had Alabama in his top 4. So that's a lie. Where those helmets sit is how the committee was going to do it. Guess how long those helmets have been sitting behind him like that? 3 weeks. He didn't know anything. Herb Street was the one saying, hey, Florida State, this is debatable. Even when Jordan was in, even when they were undefeated, this is still debatable. Florida State's debatable. You're not going to tell me you don't know what's going on 3-4 weeks in advance of anything happening. So the ACC has not only let down Florida State, but they've let down Clemson, Miami, North Carolina State, Syracuse, NC State. You name them. If they're in that conference, the new teams, SMU, Cal, you were all let down. The ACC don't give 2 twines of anything about you. They're about making money. And unfortunately, in this conference, the facts are you can go undefeated, and it will not bring enough money to ESPN to matter because it gets them into the black, possibly, if at best. And that just means that they're no longer in the red with the ACC, but they don't make any profit. You put Alabama or Georgia in, and they make millions on that side of the company anyway. So Florida State throughout this entire year was on ABC, which is also an ESPN Disney company, made them millions for the viewerships that we had. But it wasn't enough. So they said, you know what? Let's remove Florida State and let's slide in Nick Saban and Alabama. They'll bring us the money that we want to make this year. Because if they're not in the college football playoffs, ESPN loses $36-37 million was the whatever they came up with. So I mean, I don't. My whole thing is this became a beauty pageant. This has nothing to do with winning on the football field. This has nothing to do with what you do in between the lines. Mike Leach said it years ago. Oh, let's start a committee. Well, who do you want in the committee? Hell, I don't know. Let's put this guy in. I think he's a good guy. Let's put this guy in. I think he's a good guy. He goes, why don't you just tell us the 4 teams at the beginning of the year and let's save all these kids, possible concussions. Let's say basically what he's saying is like, it doesn't matter. Why don't you just tell us the 4 pageant teams that you want? And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. And that was years in advance of this happening. But these coaches aren't ignorant. I know this is crazy, and I'm going to be done right after this, I swear. It's not long. But a former Gator head coach, Dan Mullen, has made more sense than any analyst across the board over the past 48 hours. He has made the most sense. He stands toe-to-toe with anybody that wants to argue it, and no offense, but he kicks their ass every time. And it's wild to me that a Gator, former Gator, is sitting here talking about what Florida State deserves and what they earned. And that's what I started liking, that people started saying that Florida State earned it. They're not deserving. They earned it. And it's wild to me. Bryant, obviously, who James had on the later half of his show, he might end up being one of the greatest analysts that ever came out of Florida State. I don't know. But I like him a lot. I think he makes more sense than most. To me, everybody that stood up, Richard Sherman that stood up on Undisputed, Chad Ochocinco that stood up with Shannon, all these guys that have done this, that have been here and done that, are telling you that this is the most outrageous thing that they've ever seen. And look, y'all can look at it how you want to. They're part of Fox, they're part of CBS. Let's talk shit about ESPN. You can look at it that way if you want to. But the truth of the matter is they went and bled and they sweat and they put all that work in on those same fields. And that's what they were told. That's what they were taught. That from here, point A to point B, if you win and you continue on from C to Z and you win those games, you deserve the opportunity to win a national title. And that was completely taken away.